This is the 265th episode of CloudFocus Weekly for the first week of July 2017. This episode is titled Capture GTD Series Part 1. I'm your host, Jason Atwood, and joining me is co-host Justin Edelstein. This podcast is not sponsored by anybody.
No one would sponsor the GTD series.
Sponsored by David Allen.
David Allen.
He's going to sell a lot of books.
Thank you, David.
So as we discussed on the last podcast, last week, we are going to do a 4-part series in GTD. Now, if you like, what is GTD? We have a podcast for you. Episode 132. It was back in 2013.
Whoa.
And we did, I think, an hour and a half episode on it. We've also done one on week review. So we've done a couple of these. This is definitely something you can Google. It is a productivity methodology, but we figured for those who are listeners, we know there's a Venn diagram of CloudFocus Weekly listeners and GTD practitioners. We would kind of deep dive into some topics. I have some feedback from people who asked to cover a couple things. I'll try to put those in. And then we'll kind of just go along 4 different topics for the next 4 weeks. What do you say?
Right on. Let's do it.
The one thing I do want to say, just maybe to start, is also like our experience.
Yeah.
So just because why us? If this is the first time you listen to this, it maybe if you literally came on this podcast because you searched for GTD on the podcast app and found this podcast, who are you listening to and why? Because that could happen. I've actually done that. I downloaded a podcast because they were talking about GTD and just listened. I've never listened to them ever before.
Were they good?
Yeah, it's fine. But like, I just wanted to listen to them talk about GTD. I didn't know who they were. Like, it's not like I followed that podcast.
Right.
So I think the reason we would talk about this is both you and I are GTD practitioners.
We are.
Again, in episode 132 is our whole story, although your story has changed in the last 4 years. When would you say, how long have you say you've been doing GTD, getting things done? And I will never say getting things done again.
Boy. Well, you dropped the book on my desk when we worked together at the company that shall remain nameless, maybe 9 or 10 years ago.
Okay. So let me ask the question again.
And then, wait, I was getting to the actual answer, which is when did I actually start?
Yeah.
So probably first started practicing the deep art of GTD maybe 5 or 6 years ago.
Okay.
Ish. I definitely didn't just pick that book up, read it, and go.
No.
Even though you said, as my boss at the time, read this book.
I also gave you Fire Your Boss, so that was a mixed message.
It was. And there was also someone else at that company whom we've totally lost touch with who saw the book on my desk as he was walking by and was like, oh, that's awesome. I do that. That's how I get my things done.
Right.
And we both actually thought very highly of that person.
Yes.
I don't remember his name, but I remember.
It's coming to me.
It doesn't matter. We're not going to name him, but
I might.
Yeah, I remember thinking, oh, well, if Jason does it and if that guy does it, now I remember his name.
Yeah.
If he does it, then
I won't do
maybe
it.
I should read the book. But
I'll wait 4 years to read it.
But I don't read books, so I don't know, where this is going to head at this point. So it took me a little while.
I think the first time you started, so backtrack, I've been practicing GTD for, I think, 14 years now, 13. So 2004 is when I think I marked the buying of the book. Probably took me 6 months to a year to kind of get into it.
So I must have been doing something bad at work that you dropped this book on my desk.
Maybe you weren't capturing. Look how I did there. So between us, let's call it 20 years of experience. Let's round up.
That's generous.
15.
We'll take it.
Well, we also work at a company that we founded along with another partner, and I think the interesting thing for everybody who's listening is that we practice GTD at the company.
Yes.
Like, it's not just something that you and I practice alone. It is something that we have as part of the core philosophy of our company.
Yes. Arkus is a GTD shop.
Right.
And everybody speaks GTD.
Yes.
Like, we speak to each other in ways that may not make sense to some people in the way that we ask each other certain things or expect things of one another around the company.
Right.
Because otherwise it wouldn't work if everybody wasn't on board.
Well, I mean,
it would break down.
So I think that's where we're going to spin these 4 episodes a little bit now that I'm thinking about it. And we've talked about it a little bit, but
now that we've planned it, now that as we're doing it.
Of course. Well, that's the best way. It's the best way to do podcasting, just to do it.
Maybe the next one will be better.
Which is to really spin this around kind of how is this working in a corporate environment, and how does that help with your personal life and sort of more bringing the corporate works. We've talked a lot about it being personal a lot, because that episode 132, we spent an hour and a half talking about the personal side of it. So I think now it'll be interesting to bring it into we've grown as a company, and we do teach and hold everybody to a GTD standard, which is interesting. I mean, I know there's companies out there that have 200-300 people that do this as well. But anyway, so that's what I think it would be. That's the spin that I'm going to put on the next 4. We'll obviously talk about tips and stuff like that. But so let's talk about capture.
Let's talk about capture. I oftentimes get asked, so what's the most important, if I were to do one thing in GTD, like what's the one thing I should do? And it's a super hard question to answer, because I don't think there's one answer. I think there's actually 2 answers to this question, but one of them is certainly capture. And ubiquitously capturing is really, one of the 2 answers that I would give people. And it's really around, as information is coming at you, and information comes at you nowadays in so many different ways, on so many different channels, and at such a high velocity, how do you understand what to respond to, when to respond to it, and how to even wrap your head around what you need to do? And that's how I think about capture. It's like, as things are coming at me, and as people are saying things to me, as I'm getting emails, as I'm getting Slack messages, and as I'm getting text messages, I have to have a way to put it all in one place that I can trust to come back to.
Right.
And that, for me, is the process of capturing what it is that I need to do next. The thing I might need to do next is go back and read the thing that I decided not to read. That's okay.
And sometimes
I need to get it.
Yeah,
I just need to write it down.
You're not
somewhere.
capturing a task. You're just capturing an idea, a thought. You're capturing a date. You're capturing it happens all the time. Obviously, I practice this stuff, but like, it's not always necessarily a to-do. Sometimes it's just a great thought. Sometimes it's, we have those notes in the shower, I think I gave you one for one of the holidays. And I walked in, and we use it, the wife and I use it to write things down occasionally. And the other day, discuss update wills was written in the shower. That I didn't capture it, right? That someone else captured. My wife captured, the only other person in my shower. And it became like a thing, because, you're having a thought, and it's like, okay, that's not necessarily a to-do. That's a big thing. We got to sit down and talk about it. So it did, and turned into things that went into GTD. But the important part was that at the start of it, and I guess it is probably one of the best, or one of the, things that it's the first of the principles, but it's also the one that nothing else will work without it. Like, if you can't capture stuff, then the rest doesn't work.
Yeah, there's no point in the rest.
No. So that's
the rest is irrelevant if you haven't captured the next thing that you need to do, or the idea that spawns a project, or whatever it may be. If you haven't put it in a place that you trust to come back to at a later point in time, then you've lost it. Right. It's poof, gone, and then you're going to waste time thinking about, what was that thing?
Right.
Well, darn it, I wish I wrote it down, or I wish I captured it in some way.
Or flagged it, or starred it, or whatever. So
these are all just different ways of capturing. We're not, in our series, we're not talking about, we are actually in the last set, tools, how to capture tools. But if you write things down, great, write it down. If you star things or flag things in email, great, star and flag things in email. If you write things on whiteboards, cool. If you create lists, great. If you have an Evernote, awesome. Like, whatever it is, if you don't capture it in some way, shape, or form, you're not going to feel at ease about the fact that you've got it.
Right.
Like, I've got it. I'll get to it when I have to get to it because I've already captured it. And that is, for me, a big part of why GTD works, because it frees up space in your brain to think about other things and think about the task at hand or think about things creatively, because all those little pings and dings of like, oh, I need to do this, I need to do that, I'm at ease. I've got those. I've captured them. I know I've got them, and I'll get to them when I have to get to them. So capture is really at the core of it, because otherwise you can't get back to things that you haven't written down.
And I want to just go broader on capture too, because I think people do think of that as there's many different levels of it. So there is the capture of you and I are walking home, whatever, and you say, hey, let's do something, and both of us whip out our iPhones and like write it down. There's that type of capture. There's the capture of people send me emails and I look at them and I say I have to deal with that later. I star it. There's the capture of I want to do something. You talk about a TV show that I should watch, and I throw it into Evernote. Right, that's another capture.
There might be two levels to that capture, by the way. Right, there might be you have a list of TV shows.
Yes.
And I may be talking to you like, hey, you should watch this show. You might capture elsewhere, put in because the list might not be super handy.
Right.
That's why ubiquitous capture, you have to have something that's really easy to capture things with. Write that show down in my list of shows, save, done.
Yes.
Captured, done, got it. Like, you'll get to it when you get to it.
Yep. Or sometimes it's just a piece of paper. Like, someone hands me a business card. I know my process with it is I'll take the business card, I'll throw it in my physical inbox. I know it's still old school, but then I go through that inbox once a week, and so anything that goes in there, the wife will leave me something. If she wants me to deal with something, she'll put it in my inbox. So I haven't captured at that point, but I kind of have. That's my
totally
capture.
Have.
If people just don't think of it always as physical or as writing something down. Or it could be both, right? It could be a digital thing that comes at you. It's about taking it, and then putting it in a place that you have instructed yourself to go back to.
Right.
So for us, we're capturing in a tool that we know we're back in all the time, right? But if you can't just capture, like, write down on a Post-it note and then stick it in the trash. Like, it has to go to some place that, and this gets into the third week when we talk about this. But you have to be able to come back to it.
You have to be able to trust it too.
Right.
It has to be trusted. And to bring it to to Arkus, how it permeates throughout the company, you'll oftentimes say something to somebody and it'll be a little spark, and you might literally say to the person, capture that.
Right.
Like, just to make sure. Like, because it could be just this conversation and some little spark of brilliance came out of an ad hoc conversation, or over lunch you're just eating and you're like, wouldn't it be cool if we could do blah, blah? It's like, ooh, good idea. Capture that. Right. And that's in our vernacular. That's normal behavior at Arkus, to just be like, ooh, capture that.
Because I think the thing that underlined that is that there's a responsibility to that thing, that you can't just throw out, let's have lunch on the table at Arkus and a GTD practitioner without someone kind of going, whose is that? Am I capturing that because I'm taking a follow-up on it, or are you capturing? Now, what's nice about being in an organization that everybody is sort of practicing the same way is it's very clear that that something like that needs to happen. That's like, oh, you need to go do this, or someone should be capturing it, and there's a sense of responsibility. Like, if you capture it, that means you got it, and you don't leave the meetings that you would, thinking like, well, whose is that, right? Whose job is it to do that thing? It should be very clear. And when you get to the highest level of GTD, black belt, I guess, you feel dirty if someone says something to you and you don't capture it. I know it sounds weird. It feels weird when someone says, hey, can we do X, X, and X? And you're like, yeah, I think we should. And like, there's no one's writing something down, or you punt to them and say, ping me next week. That's not me capturing. I do this all the time. I say, if that's something you want, dude, ping me next week. I don't care how. You'll figure it out. Ping me next week, and we'll do it. You came to me the other day, and you said you were hitting me up in text, blah, 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 text. You were asking me to do something, and I said, please send me an email. Because I know text is a terrible place to capture stuff. It gets lost very quickly, and I was doing a million things, but I know my system with email is pretty bulletproof, so if it gets into my inbox, I'll flag it, I'll get to it, and I'll do it. Because that's like I almost told you, no, you capture it and then send it to me, and then I'll handle it. But when you do that in an organization, that everybody thinking that way, it makes it so those, again, the drop balls hopefully are less and less, because everybody's kind of highly aware of whose is this, who should be doing it, how are we doing it, and let's go.
Yep. It's also an expectation that when you ask somebody to do something and they've accepted that ask, right? They've accepted that responsibility, that the person who has accepted the responsibility should, and in most cases does, have the expectation that you, the person who's sort of assigned that, have also captured it.
Yeah,
in a way that is...
But I disagree with that.
Well, I think until you get to a certain point...
That's right.
Where, okay, we're playing the same game here.
Right.
You've captured a waiting for, right? So which we can get into in terms of contexts.
Well, why don't we just talk as a capture thing? It's another thing to capture. This is not a capture of things that I'm going to do or I want to think about or a brainiac moment I had. This is, I'm capturing the fact that someone else owes me something.
Right.
And they have committed to something. They've made a commitment. I'm going to get you X by Y. I'm going to do this. We're going to send this. I'll send you an email, whatever it is. And depending on your level with that person, you capture it yourself to say, it's important enough that I need to make sure that this person does this. And so I'm going to capture the fact that they're going to get it to me.
It's a fail-safe.
It's a fail-safe, because then when that thing comes up, the 2 or 3 days, and your system and your tools, we'll talk about in the 4th episode, when it comes up and it's like, hey, waiting for email from Justin, due on this day, and I haven't gotten it from you. Sometimes I got it, and I'm like, click, already got that. Sometimes I'm like, hey, Justin, remember that? What's happened to that email you said you were going to send me?
Right.
And I'll tell you, it makes you... It's belt and suspenders. If everybody's practicing GTD, you wouldn't need to do it. Like you and I, because we know each other so well and we've been practicing so long, I don't capture stuff that I hand to you because I know that you are, at a level that I don't have to.
That's a compliment.
Well, do you capture stuff you send to me?
No,
right? Because if you send it to me, it's there's a 99% chance that I'm going to execute on it in some way. It's very rare that it slips through the cracks. It happens. It's just not like it's not forever, but that's powerful. And the way you feel about it, again, I was going back to I was at this conference, not about this podcast, but I was at this conference. I find when I go to conferences, that's when capture becomes so important to me. I will come back and look at my tool at the end of the day or the conference or whatever the next day, and it'll be littered in this inbox full of stuff that I wrote down,
right.
Books I want to do, people I should catch up with. And all of them are like, oh, man, right, all that stuff yesterday that I talked about. Some of them are like, yeah, I'm not doing that, or I did that already, or I forwarded that email. But, like, when you are on the fly and going and, not sitting in front of your computer and don't have tons of time to think about stuff, the ability just to take little bits, whether they're ideas or tasks or to-dos or follow-ups or events. Say your friend's going to run the marathon. You might want to just capture it, throw it in the calendar, so you know it's there.
Yeah, but I was just looking, you were talking about a conference. This is just a regular week. I didn't go to a conference, didn't do anything, whatever.
At all.
Well, I mean, it was a holiday week, so it was a little short. But I'm just looking at my inbox in my tool here, and it's Friday. I generally do my weekly reviews on a Sunday.
Yep.
I sometimes start a little bit on a Saturday, but we'll do a little episode on weekly review, and we'll talk about our
episode number 3.
I'm looking here, 7 things in my inbox.
Interesting.
Which is just like, yeah, this is stuff that's not tied to a date. It's just, again, I may come back to this. I'm looking at it now, and I may be like, that was dumb.
Right.
But it wasn't dumb at the moment.
No.
At the moment, it was an idea, and, I wanted to come back to that idea and explore it more at a later point in time. I knew I didn't want to explore it at that particular moment, but because it was in my head, I wanted to get it out of my head. So I captured it, I put it somewhere where I know I'm going to get back to it at some point. I've got 7 of these things. Looking through, most of these are like, all right, I got to do a bunch of these things. But sometimes there's just these random highfalutin things in there. And sometimes it's just like I might write a sentence to myself that I just want to get back to at some point and turn into something that's not a sentence.
Right.
And I know I'll get back to it. And I've let myself be at ease with that. Like, I know I will get back to that thing, and it's not bound by time. So there's no like due date on it. So it's just sitting in my inbox, waiting for me to get to it. And I'm going to get to it when I get to it.
Well, you're going to get to it as we'll get to in the third.
Yeah, we're sort of like trying not to say like tool names and weekly review. Listen, I'm going to get to it in my weekly review. That's a thing.
But that's when we'll come back in that podcast and talk about it. But that is so important because the captured really, yes, if you just wrote things down.
This is why I say there's like one of two things.
They're all, well, I think, okay.
There's way more than like just capture and just weekly review.
Right.
But when people ask me like, what's the thing? It's like, I can't say one.
No.
Because if I just said weekly review, you'd be reviewing nothing.
Right.
And if I just said capture, well, all right. But if you didn't go back to review any of the things that you've captured or looked at it ever, it wouldn't work either.
But I would say capture's a great place, and then we'll probably wrap this one up for the week. Capture's a great place to start. So, and 2 types of starting. One is for those of you who've fallen off the wagon. And I hear this a lot from people. It's actually the number one question I get when people hear I do GTD and whatever. They say, oh, yeah, I tried that and I fell off the wagon. Or, I tried whatever. Or I was just talking to an employee of Arkus who's new and who's going through the process of reading the book, as everybody has to. Sorry. careers@arkusinc.com. So, and he was saying, oh, I've just read, I'm finishing up the book, but I haven't done anything yet because I'm like waiting to do like the big start. And I said, I wouldn't do it that way. I tell people when you're starting off, read the book first, watch some videos, whatever. But like then start with one thing. Start with it is the first principle, and take a month just to try to get good at that. Take a month. You sometimes need a tool, but you don't necessarily have a tool. You could just literally every morning, I practice this with my daughter, I have her write out a list. And I have her write a list when she comes in. I'm like, all right, so today you got to, take out the dog, blah, 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 do this, this, and this. I say, write a list. And so I'm just forcing her to capture, because I want it to become a habit. So then she will feel like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing if I don't write the things down, because of course she forgets everything, and she'll listen to this and she'll be like, yeah, I do forget everything.
So as someone who's fallen off the wagon,
a
few times, it happens. I will say, the thing that's made me sort of come back always is when you feel as though, and it can be clearly pointed out to you. So you almost need to be self-aware and someone else, and you have to be able to take it from someone else to say, hey, I've noticed a slip in, and then fill in the blank. Performance.
Right.
Responsiveness. Whatever it is, right? You miss commitments. You've missed dates. You just aren't, like, you're not yourself. You're not as on it as you were a month ago or 2 months ago. And if you can be self-aware, that's the greatest, because you self-correct. You can course correct yourself and say, let me bring myself back to, this sort of optimal state of productivity. And that's better than having it being pointed out to you. Now, the best part about being in a GTD culture is that when someone does point it out to you, it's a coaching moment and not a slap on the wrist moment.
Right.
And that's the best part about, feeling a part of the GTD culture at Arkus, I'll say, is that everyone's doing it, everyone's practicing it. And if you see that someone's sort of, missing something or slipping on something, it's more of a teachable moment and a coachable moment to say, do you have a project for that? Did you capture the fact that you needed to do that? Can I see it?
Right.
Like, let me look at what you're doing to handle that situation.
Right.
And at that point, it starts to click back in like, oh, right. If I would have captured that, I would not have missed a deadline on something, or I wouldn't feel so overwhelmed because I'm being too reactionary and I'm not ahead of the game. I'm behind the game. If you capture everything, and it's really an art, it's like what to capture as it's coming at you versus what to just do in the moment. It's like, oh, right, the 2-minute rule. Like, I've got 2 minutes to do this. It'll take me a minute. Let me just do it. Versus, I don't got the time to read that right now. Flag, star, whatever. Capture the fact I need to get back to that at some point in time, and then trust in the fact that you will. That's the big thing. You got to trust the fact that you will get back to the thing that you captured, and that will ease your mind in the whole situation.
But it takes a while. So just those who fall off and get back on, it takes a while to get to that point where your brain will trust your other system. It'll trust those other inboxes. It won't kind of try to remember, because if it keeps trying to remember, the theories are the numbers dropping to how many things we can actually keep like remembering. It used to be like 8, now I think it's down to 4. Your brain is for David Allen says all the time, your brain's for having ideas, not holding them. Like, get them out somewhere else. If just start doing it, even if you just make a simple list. Again, one of the things he talks about all the time is if you're ever feeling stressed, if you sit down and you write a list of the things you need to do, doesn't it just help? It helps, because all of a sudden you took this stuff and you organized it a little bit in front of you, and it feels easier to handle than, oh, I got to remember all to do all this stuff. In the hardest times I've seen people in their life, and I had some times last year, like just getting that person to say, let's make a list. And it helped. It doesn't help grief, but it helps like that kind of just overwhelmingness. So huge capture. It's a great way to get started. You can read the book and then just start, paper, and just start writing stuff down. Write things you have to do, bigger things in your life. So that's capture. All right, so next week we'll come back. We'll talk about the natural planning model, which is, I think, it's kind of difficult. I think people don't get it, and I think it's a kind of a missing. People talk about capture and weekly review a lot. They don't talk about the natural planning model, which is, I think that's why we want to talk about it. So we'll do that next week. Justin and Jason saying, enjoy those cloudy